Hello everybody, and welcome to this video that shows you how to work loop stitch as it's found on the Orkney hood, which dates to very early period and is Pictish. So I'm working from a diagram here that appeared in the original analysis published in 1952, if I remember correctly, by Audrey Henshaw. I'll put the link to that in the description. And the diagrams don't actually show how this stitch was started. So you can see that I've attached my 3 threads with knots at the top. And I've also I've used different colours because the stitch is quite complicated, and I thought this would help with you visualising the weaving and sewing process. Oh yes, and also I've done the stitching a lot bigger than it would be if you were doing it properly, in order for you to hopefully be able to see the weaving process more easily. So it doesn't look as neat, and it kind of looks more bulky than the when you sew it and the original. So at this point I realised I'd actually gone wrong. So I'm just unpicking it here, and I'll start the process again in a minute. But in the meantime, you'll see that I'm actually reusing a piece of fabric where the print for a kit didn't work out properly. So I'm following good old early medieval fashion of reusing and recycling fabric. Okay, so we're about to start again. So taking my first colour, which is the pink, I thread it underneath the bar, and then I thread the 2 other colours under the consecutive bars, one under the other. So this is placing them in position and ready to start the weaving process. So I take my first thread, the pink one, and weave it underneath the other 2. And now I'm going to thread it underneath a bar that you can see that I've positioned at the top left here. This is because the diagrams don't show you how the loops are started off originally. So I've done that front to back, and now you thread it underneath the next free bar on the main working line. So that now becomes a passive thread placed to the right out of the way. And I take the next thread, which is green, and pass it underneath the 2 passive threads. And I now weave it, oh no, in this instance, sorry, I pass it through the loop again, and then I weave it underneath from top to bottom, back to front, under itself, creating a loop that's held in position, and pass the thread underneath the next free bar on the working line. So that now moves to the right and becomes a passive thread, and I pick up the next working one, which is the brown thread. I'm just moving the threads further up the working line and out of the way there. So this thread is passed underneath the 2, the pink and the green, the 2 passive ones. And I'm now starting the weaving process proper. So I'm now going to pass the brown thread underneath the 2 green ones. And in this instance, I did it from left to right, but you'll see that later on everything works from right to left. So, and then now pass it back through the loop, the brown loop, from front to back, top to bottom, pull that loop neat, and pull the thread under the next bar. So that is taken to the right hand side, becomes the passive thread. Pick up the next one, which in this sample is pink, pass it underneath the two unused ones, and I now pass that thread underneath the two brown threads from the previous stitch from right to left, you can see there hopefully, and then pull the loop tight and then pass the needle through the pink loop from back to front and then underneath the next working bar. And this is the process that is repeated from now on. So the next thread will be the green one, just moving them around a bit to make it easy to work. So the green becomes the active thread, pass it under the two passive ones, and then behind the two pink threads that were to the left hand side from right to left, that's from the previous stitch, pull that loop neat, then take the needle through the green loop from front to back, back to front, sorry, and then I thread that green thread underneath that bar. As I say, this is the complete working process. I'll just go through it one more time. So my next active thread is the brown one. So pass it underneath the pink and the green, the two passive threads, from right to left, and then the brown is passed underneath the two green threads from right to left. Pull that loop slightly tighter, then pass the needle through that brown loop from back to front. Oh, I realised I'd gone through the green loop the wrong way, so I undid it. So yeah, we're now going to pass the brown thread through the green from right to left through those two green ones of the previous stitch. There we go. Tidy that loop up and then pass the needle from the front to the back through that loop, pulling it taut and then underneath that bar. And now we're working the same process again with the pink thread under the two passive ones, from right to left through behind those two threads on the left hand side of the previous stitch. Tidy your loop up and bring your thread from the back to the front of your loop. And then underneath the bar. So as I said, I keep my threads in a set order on the right hand side of the work. So the next one I pick up is always the one at the top, and that helps me keep everything in order. Obviously in this case the different colours helped as well, but if you're working it in the same colour thread for all three lengths, then doing that will help. So this process works until the very end, and then you can cast off your thread. So the diagram doesn't show how the original Orkney hood version was cast off, so you'll see at the end of the video I just do a couple of small stitches as we would do normally today. I am hoping to go and see the Orkney hood in a couple of years. It might be a bit longer or so time, so when I do, I'll see if I can get a detailed look at the start and finish, and discover how the stitch was cast on and off, and then give you an update, but that's going to be a few years down the line. So you can see, what you'll find is at the end that, except for the casting on and off stitches, the threads don't pierce the ground fabric at all. So there's no thread or stitching to be seen on the reverse of the fabric. And the bars that I've sewn into the ground fabric, I did that to make them bigger, so that I could work this stitch large, as I said at the beginning of the video. But presumably, because the original was worked in wool and it was quite coarse compared to this linen fabric that I'm using for the sample, that the original sewing could have been worked through threads on the ground fabric, and that could have been counted along, so the stitching could have been quite even, or it could have been done by eye, because you stitchers, we know how your eye gets in, and you can work these things out. So we're nearly at the bottom now. Once you get into a rhythm, it's quite a nice stitch to work. You've just got to not think about it, otherwise you get your threads muddled up. So this is the last one, this brown one. Under the 2 passive threads, through the green threads on the left, through the loop, and then through that bar at the end. And as I say, this doesn't look as neat as the original would, but that's because I've created it quite large, because I wanted you to be able to see it, and hopefully you can. Yes, I wasn't very happy with this bit, so I'm just manipulating it a little bit. And there we go, there's a diagram of the original too. They don't look anything like. They will when you've done it and it's done the proper size. Well, good luck with your samples, and I hope you enjoy it, and let me know how you get on. Until next time then,